She slipped out of reality with nothing more than a note, one line scrawled on a ragged piece of stolen paper: "Take care of the children." Then she vanished. No drama, no confrontation, no trace, just silence. That was in 1965. 48 years later, her name would shock a nation. Imagine disappearing at the center of your own life. You're a mother, a friend, a partner. Your face is on a cereal box of suburban normalcy. Then one day you're simply gone and the world blinked and lost you. Lucy Ann Johnson didn't vanish into myth, she fled into necessity. She walked out of her home in Surrey, British Columbia, in her late 30s, wearing bright scarves and hope in her pocket. Doctors, dentists, neighbors, none would see her again. Not for more than 4 decades. The RCMP dug holes in her backyard. Reporters smelled scandal. Rumors named her husband a prime suspect, but they unearthed nothing. No struggle, no shallow grave, no reason the earth had swallowed her. It absorbed the questions instead, each passing year layering dust over her name. Her children grew up with missing birthdays and whispered what-ifs. Her husband kept her chair at dinner. Her son fixed broken toys she would never see. They held tightly to a name that became a ghost. Lucy Ann wasn't gone in memory, but she was erased from their mornings. But one daughter, she refused to let the story die. She wasn't looking for remains. She was seeking answers. There were no DNA leads, no forensic breakthroughs, no advanced tests that could bridge the gap between 1965 and 2013. She had only guts and recklessness. She placed an ad in a Yukon newspaper, thousands of miles away across mountains and memory. It said nothing dramatic, no come home, just her mother's name, Lucy Ann Johnson, and a phone number. That phone didn't ring right away, but it rang. On a cold July morning in 2013, someone in Whitehorse answered and asked, "Is this about Lucy? I'm on line 5. A stranger was holding her answer. Her mother lived. She had lived. No ransom note, no plea for help, just words from a voice that spoke of an escape, of life, of sorrows she would never speak of. She said, "I didn't run because I wanted to hurt you. I ran because I had to live." The reunion was not sunlit. It wasn't cinematic. It was cautious. This was a woman who had built an entire lifetime within someone else's blind spot, and she wasn't sure she knew how to come back. But when she stepped into the embrace of her daughter, something broke. The years melted. The centuries of silence cracked, and memories flooded back to a mother who had watched her children from afar, not bury them in guilt, but in unspoken apology. It wasn't a happy ending. Not yet. There would be questions, anger, years to catch up, but there was also hope, a fragile bloom in the frozen ground. Lucy Ann's story forced us to consider that disappearance isn't always about seizure or violence. Sometimes, it's about desperation, survival, reinvention. And if one mother could disappear under the radar, start over in a wilderness so vast that even the maps don't chart memory, what does that say about the boundaries of identity, the limits of connection? Her disappearance wasn't solved by police. It was solved by persistence, by familial love that refused to be erased. It was solved because one woman made the choice to cross time, space, and grief in search of a name written half in hope, half in heartbreak. This is not just her story. It's our collective reckoning with what we owe to those who vanish, not in violence but in silence. It's our challenge to look for the unlooked for, to color in the blanks, to believe in the lives written between the lines. She stepped off the plane and into a whirlwind of cameras and questions, but Lucy's expression remained soft, guarded. She had built a life beyond the spotlight. A tiny house in the Yukon, a new name, new routines, new love, 3 children who didn't know she was born out of another life they'd never see. Her daughter, gripping her hand, felt every mile of silence between them as a weight. Years passed in photographs and phone calls, but this reunion was different. It was the first time their hands were bare, touching. That touch carried decades of unsaid apologies, curiosity, sorrow, and relief. Lucy didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply breathed, like she had learned how again. They drove into the wilderness, cabin lights flickering in the dusk, the mountains exhaling around them. Lucy pointed out where she worked part-time, where her children learned to walk, where she finally allowed herself laughter between one life and the other. Her daughter asked about those years, "What scared you the most?" But Lucy only answered with silence, then a soft, "I feared dying before I found safety." That honesty cut deeper than any accusation. It revealed she hadn't fled from love. She had fled toward survival. Photos taken during the visit captured fleeting moments, hands brushing over old memories on a mantle, a crooked smile when she saw a photo of her childhood dog, the gentle tremor in her fingers as she held a Yukon winter cap. Then came the deeper reckoning. The family arranged meetings, son to mother, grandchild to grandma. Some visits were warm, others strained. A granddaughter still in school didn't understand why her grandmother wasn't at her graduation, and the hurt on her face was raw. Years of absence can't be erased with one embrace. In quiet moments around the dinner table, Lucy said, "I never forgot you," but the silence stung. Separated lives create chasms as much as walls, and some needed rebuilding from the ground up. Meanwhile, media outlets buzzed with questions about identity. How could someone vanish and be alive? Others praised Lucy's courage. Some condemned her disappearance as abandonment. Debate tore across headlines and online forums, but for Lucy and her family, each headline was a reminder of the distance between their hearts and the world outside their reunion. Not every question found an answer, not every tear dried, but they were together in the same place. For the first time in nearly 50 years, that presence, a woman rewriting the narrative of her life, was worth every moment of uncertainty and pain. She spoke publicly once, for a single interview. Her silvered voice echoed through the speakers. "I'm not the same person who walked away. I'm not the same who returned. I'm just fortunate. No excuses, no defenses. Just a woman caught between love and loss, living in the margin of two worlds she never fully belonged to." This wasn't closure, it was continuation. They didn't know if forgiveness would ever bloom. They didn't know if the laughter they once shared could return. But they knew the story was alive again, and that was enough, because sometimes the journey home isn't a celebration, it's a beginning. They say you can't outrun your past, but Lucy Ann Johnson did. She moved into a house wrapped in sagebrush and silence. No internet to map her history, no social media tagging her face. She worked odd jobs, housekeeping at the lodge, helping travelers find their way. She attended Sunday services, quietly, without introducing herself. She married again, under another name. This marriage wasn't a lie, it was a rescue. She found laughter in morning routines, lullabies in fading light, a second life unburdened by the fear that first drove her away. She birthed children who called her mom, without knowing the name she left behind. Yet behind those eyes lay memories she never thanked, never acknowledged, never let seep back into her world. Those years were woven with contradictions. A morning spent teaching her daughter to bake cinnamon buns, a midnight standing guard by locked doors, sure she'd hear a knock from someone she feared. Each smile carried an echo of a woman who believed home would kill her. Now, as family members visited in Yukon cabins, they gathered items from her past, the scarf she wore in her first days of escape, the marriage certificate from years ago, a photo of her teenage self that looked both familiar and foreign. Her daughter held those relics as though they were talismans, each stitch a promise to remember the secret they were finally able to name. One day, as leaves turned golden, Lucy's old friend from Surrey traveled north. Their reunion was quiet, no speeches, just two women standing in a yard of peonies. Their handshake spoke of ages lost. Their eyes met with tears and understanding, a bond formed across time, proof that the past is never fully absent, even if buried. This friend brought a photo from 1964, Lucy in a sundress, laughing with friends. The sight triggered something raw in her. She smiled, then looked away. That image held both comfort and unbearable grief. It represented a future that was stolen, a life where she stayed, where she didn't have to run. Lucy's children asked why she held back, why she never let them in. Her answer was simple and haunting. I was afraid of the consequences of returning. She feared guilt. She feared shame. She feared that love might not be enough to heal the wounds of time, and maybe she was right. The Yukon air was thin with the weight of decades. The silence between her and her daughter was pregnant with words unsaid. But day by day, she filled those spaces. She planted roses in the yard. She joined community events. She sat at the edge of a pond watching ducks and saw that everything still moved forward, world or no world. She decided memories wouldn't kill her, but living fully might save her. That transformation didn't happen at once. It came slowly, in moments of coffee shared on a porch, in laughter when her granddaughter dropped a plate, in tears when a neighbor greeted her by name, her real name, and offered a hug she never thought to accept. In the flicker of those moments, Lucy reclaimed pieces of herself, not the runaway, but the mother, the friend, the woman who refused to vanish. There are reunions that play out like fairy tales, tearful embraces, soft music, forgiveness whispered over family dinners, and then there was Lucy's. The newspapers called it a miracle. Mother found after 48 years, one headline read. But miracles, as Lucy quickly discovered, aren't always soft. Sometimes they're sharp. Sometimes they cut through comfort and expose truths that have waited half a century to breathe. When Lucy Ann Johnson's face, older now, etched with time, first appeared on the screen of a national broadcast, the world stopped. Not because she was famous, but because her story was unbelievable. Mothers don't just disappear, and they certainly don't build second lives in secret. But Lucy had done both. Her daughter, Linda Evans, who had lived her entire adult life believing her mother had been murdered, now stood in a haze of disbelief. Her voice cracked when she addressed the reporters. "We buried her in our minds. We grieved a ghost. Now, she's alive?" When Linda traveled to meet her mother, there was no roadmap. What do you say to someone who vanished from your childhood? Someone whose face had lived only in fading photographs, someone you loved and resented in equal measure. The reunion happened not in front of cameras, but quietly, under an overcast Yukon sky. Lucy stood waiting outside her modest home, clutching a mug of tea with trembling hands. Linda approached slowly, tears already falling. Neither woman knew who should speak first. Then Lucy whispered, "You have your father's eyes." It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real. That first conversation stretched for hours. Lucy confessed that she had left to escape what she called a cage of fear. She had tried to return once years after, but panicked at the edge of Surrey. She stood across the street from her old home and watched through a window as her children played, unable to step forward. "I was already a ghost," she said. "I thought it would hurt more to haunt you than to stay away." Linda listened in silence. The ache she'd carried since childhood did not vanish, but something unexpected bloomed inside her, not forgiveness yet, but understanding. Still, not everyone accepted Lucy's return with open arms. The police reopened the missing persons file. Neighbors questioned whether charges should be filed for her abandonment. Talk show hosts speculated on mental illness, infidelity, and secret abuse. Strangers on the internet debated whether Lucy was a villain or a victim. But Lucy didn't respond to any of it. She didn't give interviews, she didn't defend herself. She spent her days tending to her garden, walking along the lake with her granddaughter, and slowly writing a journal that would never be published. But that helped her remember who she was before she ran. She had no interest in being a symbol. She only wanted a chance to be a mother again. For Linda, it was complicated. How do you fold someone back into your life after nearly 5 decades of absence? But she tried. She visited monthly. She brought photos of Lucy's grandchildren. They cooked together. They watched old family videos. And little by little, they began to stitch something fragile and beautiful, a bond forged not in time, but in truth. And the truth, no matter how delayed, has weight. It anchors the soul. Years passed. Lucy became more open. She joined a local support group for women who had left abusive relationships. She volunteered at a shelter, And one night during a winter storm, she told her story at a community event. "I am not proud of how I left," she began, "but I'm still here, and I still love the ones I left behind." The room fell silent. One woman stood and clapped, then another, until the room echoed with something Lucy never expected, not applause, but grace. And just like that, the woman who vanished in 1965 stopped running. She was no longer a headline, no longer a mystery, no longer a ghost. She was home. Imagine waking up one morning and finding out your life, your grief, your memories, your history had a chapter missing, a chapter that someone had taken with them when they vanished. That was Linda's reality. And Lucy's return didn't just fill in that blank page, it rewrote the story entirely. The public eventually moved on. News cycles spun forward. The world's attention flickered to newer mysteries. But for one family, for one woman, everything had just begun. Lucy Ann Johnson was no longer just the missing mother from 1965. She was the living embodiment of resilience, of pain left unsaid, of the raw human capacity to carry guilt and hope in the same breath. She didn't return expecting applause. She came back because she had finally found the courage to confront what she ran from herself. Behind closed doors, the healing was messy. It wasn't always hugs and heart-to-hearts. There were days Linda wouldn't answer Lucy's calls. Birthdays missed still hurt. Some memories stayed broken. But slowly, they carved out space for each other. Not as mother and daughter reborn, but as two women with scars and stories, rebuilding a bridge that had collapsed decades earlier. And in doing so, they reminded us of something vital, that the truth, no matter how delayed, is always worth uncovering. That silence can be broken and lives can be reclaimed, even after half a century in the shadows. Linda said it best in a rare interview, "I don't know if I got my mom back, but I got a piece of myself back. That matters." Lucy spent the rest of her days quietly. No memoirs, no viral TED Talks. Just a woman who dared to face the wreckage of her past and still chose connection over comfort. She passed away a few years later, peacefully, at home, surrounded by photos of her grandchildren and letters from Linda she read over and over again. One of them ended with the words, "You were gone, but you were never erased." In a world that too often forgets the disappeared, this story asks you to remember. Not just the face on a poster or the name on a file, but the people, the humanity, the aftermath. Because some stories aren't just about being lost. They're about the fragile, miraculous moment when someone is finally found. Don't just watch. Respond. Like this video so the algorithm doesn't bury another name. Share it with someone who still believes the truth matters. Subscribe for more stories that deserve to be told.